collar falls away from her throat for the first time in 90 days. 6 alphas watch as she touches bare skin, free to shift, free to run. But she doesn't move. "This is home now," she whispers, and they smile. For we dive and comment where in the world you are watching from, and don't forget to click subscribe. 140 days earlier, Lyra Sylvain knelt in very different circumstances. The great hall of Silver Creek Pack smelled like pine smoke and old hatred. Stone walls rose 30 feet above her head, carved with the names of alphas going back 200 years. Every name represented strength power, the kind of dominance that built empires in the Rocky Mountain wilderness. Her name would never be carved there. Lyra kept her eyes down, studying the worn grooves in the wooden floor. She'd scrubbed these floors as a child, back when her mother was still alive, to teach her that service was survival for Omegas like them. Back before the sickness took her mother and left Lyra alone with only one skill that mattered: healing. The skill that hadn't been enough. She was 21 years old, and she'd spent every single one of those years being told she was broken. The evidence was undeniable. While other wolf pups shifted fully by age 12, running wild through the forest in fur and fang, Lyra could only manage partial transformations. Claws when she needed them, enhanced hearing if she concentrated, eyes that could see in darkness if she focused hard enough. But never the full wolf form that marked a shifter as complete, as whole, as worthy. The pack elders called it a defect, a weakness in her bloodline, proof that some wolves were simply meant to serve rather than lead. Lyra had learned to live with their contempt, had learned to hold her head high even when they whispered as she passed, had learned to find purpose in her healing work, in the lives she saved with her mother's herbs and her own steady hands. She'd learned everything except how to be enough for the man who now stood before her. Alpha Thorn Blackwell was 35 years old and built like the mountains themselves. 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of melted amber. He'd been alpha for 7 years, since his father died in a border dispute with a rival pack. And in those 7 years, he doubled their territory and tripled their wealth. He was everything an alpha should be: strong, ruthless, capable of violence when necessary, and mercy when strategic. And for 3 months, Lyra had believed he wanted her. The connection had snapped into place on her 21st birthday during the full moon celebration. She'd felt it like a physical force that pulled toward him, that made her Omega instincts sing with recognition and need. He'd felt it too. She'd seen it in his eyes, that flash of awareness of claim of mine. He'd courted her properly after that, brought her wildflowers from the high meadows, walked with her in the evenings talking about pack politics and future plans, kissed her under the stars with a gentleness that made her believe she might finally belong somewhere. She'd been so desperately, pathetically grateful. 3 months of believing that maybe, just maybe, her defect didn't matter. That Thorn saw past her inability to shift fully, saw the worth in her healing skills, in her quiet determination, in the way she never complained or caused trouble. 3 months of hope. It ended today. "Look at me, Lyra." Thorn's voice carried the weight of alpha command, the kind of power that made lesser wolves bare their throats in automatic submission. Lyra had no choice but to obey. Her head lifted without her permission, her green eyes meeting his amber stare. He stood on the raised dais where the alpha's throne sat, carved from a single massive oak. The entire pack council flanked him, 12 elders, all male, all regarding her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. She recognized old Edgar Whitlock in the front, the councilman who'd argued loudest against allowing her to train as a healer, who'd said repeatedly that defective Omegas should be assigned to manual labor, not entrusted with the pack's health. Apparently, he'd finally convinced Thorn. "I, Thorn Blackwell, Alpha of Silver Creek Pack, hereby reject you, Lyra Sylvain, as my mate." The words hit like physical blows. Lyra felt her breath catch, felt something vital crack deep in her chest, where the connection had lived for 3 months. It hadn't been a complete bond yet, not without claiming, but it had been real enough to hurt. And Thorn wasn't finished. "You are weak." His voice rang through the great hall, carrying to every corner where pack members had gathered to witness this. "You are defective. Your inability to shift properly is a curse upon our bloodline, proof that the moon goddess herself has marked you as unworthy." Lyra dug her nails into her palms, using the pain to anchor herself. She would not cry. She would not beg. She would not give them that satisfaction. "An alpha's mate must be strong enough to bear strong heirs," Thorn continued, and now his voice held something that might have been regret if she didn't know better. "She must be capable of defending the pack in times of war, of shifting fully to fight beside her mate. You cannot do these things, Lyra. You will never be able to do these things." "Your mother was weak," Edgar interjected from his position beside the throne. "She died of a common sickness, that any healthy wolf would have survived. Clearly the defect runs in your bloodline. We cannot allow it to spread further. The insult to her mother's memory sent rage flooding through Lyra's veins, hot and fierce. Her hands began to shift without her conscious choice, bones lengthening, nails extending into the curved black claws that were her only reliable transformation. For a moment she imagined lunging at Edgar, raking those claws across his smug face, making him bleed for daring to speak ill of the kindest woman who'd ever lived. But that would only prove their point, that she was unstable, uncontrollable, unworthy. Lyra forced her hands back to human form, forced her breathing to steady, forced her voice to remain calm when she finally spoke. I accept your rejection, Alpha Thorn. Surprise flickered across his face. He'd expected her to plead, to cry, to make a scene that would justify his cruelty. She wouldn't give him that either. I accept that you find me unworthy, she continued, her voice carrying clearly despite the way her heart was shattering. I accept that my service to this pack as a healer means nothing compared to my inability to shift. I accept all of it. She rose from her knees, standing to her full height of 5 feet 2 inches. Insignificant compared to the wolves surrounding her, but she kept her spine straight and her chin lifted. But I will not accept your judgment of my mother. She died protecting me from rogues, buying time with her life so I could escape. She was brave and strong and worth 10 of you, Thorn Blackwell. Remember that when you lie awake at night, wondering if you made the right choice. The words fell into shocked silence. Omegas didn't speak to Alphas like that. Defective Omegas certainly didn't. Thorn's face darkened with anger. You overstep, Omega. I'm not your Omega anymore, Lyra said quietly. You made that clear. No. Edgar stepped forward, his thin face twisted with vindictive pleasure. You're not anyone's Omega. You're a liability to this pack, a drain on resources, a defect in our bloodline, a constant reminder of weakness. He turned to address the council. I move that we exile Lyra Sylvain from Silver Creek territory, effective immediately. Let her survive on her own if she's so strong and brave. Murmurs rippled through the assembled pack members. Exile was a death sentence for a lone Omega. Without a pack's protection, without the ability to shift and hunt properly, Lyra would last maybe 3 days in the wilderness before rogues found her or she starved. Everyone knew it. That was the point. Seconded, another councilman said quickly. Then another. Within moments, 8 of the 12 had voted for exile. Thorn said nothing. He could have stopped it with a single word, could have shown mercy, could have at least allowed her to stay as a pack healer, even without the connection. He stayed silent. The motion carries, Edgar announced with barely concealed glee. Lyra Sylvain, you have until sunset to gather your belongings and leave Silver Creek territory. If you are found within our borders after dark, you will be killed on sight. 4 hours. They were giving her 4 hours to leave the only home she'd ever known. Lyra looked at Thorn one last time. He wouldn't meet her eyes now, his gaze fixed somewhere over her shoulder. Coward. He'd courted her, kissed her, made her believe she mattered, and now he couldn't even look at her while his council sentenced her to death. I need to speak with Dorothy Hartwell, Lyra said, addressing Edgar since Thorn had apparently lost his voice. My mentor. I have healing supplies stored in her cabin that belong to me. Edgar waved a dismissive hand. 1 hour with the old woman, then you leave. Guards will escort you to ensure you don't steal anything. Of course they would, because after 21 years of service, after saving dozens of pack members with her healing skills, they still thought she was a thief. Lyra turned and walked toward the Great Hall's massive doors. The crowd parted for her like she carried disease. She recognized faces in that sea of wolves, children she'd treated for fevers, warriors she'd stitched up after border skirmishes, mothers she'd helped through difficult births. Not one of them met her eyes. Not one of them spoke in her defense. The October air hit her face like a slap when she stepped outside. The afternoon sun painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson aspens, turning brilliant yellow against the dark green pine. It was beautiful in the way that wild places were always beautiful, indifferent to the small tragedies of the creatures living within them. 2 guards fell into step behind her, young males barely 20, who'd probably volunteered for this duty because it meant they could brag about escorting the defective Omega to her exile. Lyra ignored them and walked. Dorothy Hartwell's cabin sat on the eastern edge of pack territory, a small log structure that had been home to the pack's head healer for as long as anyone could remember. Smoke rose from the chimney, carrying the familiar scent of sage and chamomile. The door opened before Lyra could knock. Dorothy was 68 years old with silver hair she wore in a long braid and eyes that had seen too much suffering to be shocked by anything anymore. She'd been beautiful once before time, and hardship carved lines into her face. She'd also been something else, though she rarely spoke of it. She'd been a war prize 40 years ago, when interpack conflicts were settled with violence and the victors claimed whatever they wanted from the defeated. She'd survived. I heard, Dorothy said, simply stepping aside to let Lyra enter. Her gaze flicked to the guards. Wait outside. The girl's not going to run away in the next hour. The guards hesitated, but Dorothy had earned enough respect over 4 decades of service that they eventually nodded and took up positions flanking the door. The cabin's interior was exactly as Lyra remembered, herbs hanging from the rafters to dry shelves lined with jars of salves and tinctures of fire crackling in the stone hearth. It smelled like home in a way that nowhere else ever had. Dorothy moved to the small kitchen area and began preparing a tea with the kind of calm efficiency that had taught Lyra everything she knew about healing. As if this were a normal visit, as if Lyra's entire world hadn't just collapsed. Sit, the older woman commanded. Lyra sat. Dorothy worked in silence for several minutes, the only sounds the clink of pottery and the hiss of water heating over the fire. When she finally set 2 steaming cups on the worn wooden table, she fixed Lyra with a look that saw straight through every defense. Tell me. So Lyra did. She told her about the rejection, about Edgar's cruelty, about Thorne's cowardice, about the exile that would almost certainly end in her death within days. Her voice stayed steady through all of it. She'd cried enough over Thorne Blackwell in the past 3 months. She wouldn't waste any more tears on him now. When she finished, Dorothy was quiet for a long moment, sipping her tea and staring into the fire. Your mother, she finally said, once told me something I've never forgotten. She said that the moon goddess gives some wolves claws and fangs, but she gives others something more dangerous, the ability to survive what should destroy them. I don't feel very dangerous right now, Lyra said. No, you feel heartbroken and terrified and alone. Dorothy reached across the table and gripped Lyra's hand with surprising strength. But you're also your mother's daughter. She survived things that would have killed weaker women. So will you. She died, Dot. She died protecting you. There's a difference between death and defeat, child. She was never defeated. Neither will you be. Dorothy rose and moved to a cabinet in the corner, pulling out a worn leather pack. She began filling it with methodical precision, dried meat that would last weeks, water purification tablets, a first aid kit, with the essential supplies a healer would need: flint for starting fires, a small folding knife, a survival pack. You knew, Lyra said quietly. You knew this was coming. I suspected. Dorothy didn't look at her, focused on her packing. Thorne's been meeting with the Eastern Territories pack for months. Their alpha has a daughter of mating age. Beautiful from what I hear. Full shift by age 10. Comes with a substantial dowry of territory and resources. The words landed like stones in Lyra's stomach. He was planning to reject me all along. Probably from the moment the connection snapped into place and he realized what you were. Dorothy finally turned to face her. What you really are, I mean, not what they think you are. Lyra frowned. I don't understand. Your partial shift isn't a defect, child, it's control. Dorothy's voice dropped to barely above a whisper, even though the guards outside couldn't possibly hear. True control, the kind that only shows up in very old bloodlines. Bloodlines that the Pax thought died out centuries ago. What are you talking about? Dorothy pulled a small leather journal from another cabinet, its pages yellowed with age. She flipped through until she found what she was looking for, then turned it so Lyra could see. The page showed a drawing of a wolf mid-transformation, but wrong somehow. Partial, one paw still human, one shifted to claws, one eye human green, one glowing wolf amber. The Sylvain line, Dorothy read from the text below the image, descends from the ancient Selene pack chosen of the moon goddess herself. They were known for their ability to shift selectively, taking only the aspects they needed for any given situation. Claws for climbing, enhanced hearing for tracking, night vision for hunting, speed without the full transformation that left them vulnerable during the change. Lyra stared at the drawing, at the family names she'd carried her whole life suddenly taking on new meaning. They were the goddess's special guard, Dorothy continued, her champions. But the other packs grew jealous of their gifts, feared their power. So they started a rumor that selective shifting was a defect, a weakness, proof of tainted bloodlines. They hunted the Selene-wide pack to near extinction. How do you know all this? Dorothy's smile was sad. Because I was war prize to the pack that killed the last known, Selene Alpha. I was his healer. I saw what he could do before they murdered him. And I recognized the same gift in your mother the day she arrived here pregnant and alone, claiming to be a widow from a pack that had been destroyed by rogues. Lyra's hands trembled around her teacup. My mother lied about who we were. She protected you. There's a difference. Dorothy closed the journal and pressed it into Lyra's hands along with the survival pack. The wolves who remember the truth about the Selene line are mostly dead now. The young ones only know the propaganda. But your gift is real, Lyra. It's not weakness. It's a weapon those fools are too ignorant to recognize. That doesn't change the fact that I'm exiled, that I'll be dead in a few days. Maybe, or maybe the moon goddess has other plans. Dorothy moved to the door, checking to ensure the guards weren't listening, then returned to grip Lyra's shoulders. Head north when you leave, not south toward easier territory, north into the deep wilderness where the old families still hunt. That's suicide. Nightfang Pack controls the northern mountains. Nightfang Pack, Dorothy said slowly, deliberately, doesn't kill wolves for being different. They value strength in all its forms. And their alpha? She paused, something complicated crossing her face. Their alpha knows the truth about the old bloodlines, because he carries one himself. Before Lyra could ask what that meant, a guard pounded on the door. Time's up, Omega. Alpha wants you gone before sunset. Dorothy pulled Lyra into a fierce embrace, her voice dropping to barely a whisper against her ear. North, through the Red Ridge Pass. 3 days hard travel. You'll know Nightfang territory by the scent markers. When you reach them, don't run. They'll find you either way. And child, yes, your mother would be so proud of the woman you've become. Then she was pushing Lyra toward the door, pressing the pack and journal into her hands, her eyes bright with unshed tears that she'd never allow to fall in front of the guards. Lyra stepped out into the cooling afternoon. The sun was already sinking toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that looked too much like blood. The guards escorted her to her small cabin on the pack's southern edge, where she'd lived alone since her mother died. They watched while she gathered the few possessions that mattered: her mother's silver locket, a change of clothes, the worn blanket that still smelled faintly of lavender and safety. She left everything else: the furniture, the dishes, the life she'd built in this place that had never really wanted her. Sunset came fast in the mountains. By the time Lyra reached the pack's boundary markers, the sky was already darkening to purple, and the first stars were appearing. Behind her, Silver Creek territory sprawled across the foothills, smoke rising from 100 hearths where wolves gathered for dinner, for warmth, for the simple comfort of pack. She would never belong to that again. Lyra took one last look at the only home she'd ever known, then turned north. The first night alone in the wilderness was the longest of Lyra's life. She'd hiked until full dark, putting as much distance as possible between herself and Silver Creek territory before stopping to make camp in a small cave she'd noticed during training runs years ago. The cave was barely deep enough to keep the wind out, but it was defensible and high enough that she could see anything approaching from below. Dorothy's survival pack proved its worth immediately. The dried meat was tough, but nourishing. The water purification tablets turned the trickle from a nearby stream into something drinkable. The fire-starting flint sparked on the first try, though gathering enough dry wood in the dark took longer than she'd hoped. Lyra sat with her back against the cave wall, feeding small branches to the flames and listening to the night sounds of the forest. Owls hunting, small creatures scurrying through underbrush, the distant howl of wolves that might have been rogues, or might have been Silver Creek patrols ensuring she was truly gone. She pulled her mother's journal from the pack, running her fingers over the worn leather cover. Inside the pages told the story Dorothy had mentioned and more. Her mother's handwriting filled the margins, notes and observations about the Selene bloodline that she'd gathered over years of careful research. One entry dated 2 months before Lyra was born made her breath catch. The dreams persist. The moon goddess shows me a daughter with eyes like spring grass and hair like moonlight. She shows me that child standing before 6 thrones, 6 crowns, 6 alphas, who bow to no one except her. She shows me my daughter becoming something the old songs speak of, but no one believes exists anymore. I don't understand the visions. I only know that I must protect her until the time comes for her to step into her destiny. Even if protecting her means lying about who we are. Even if it means she grows up thinking herself broken when she is actually blessed. Lyra read the passage 3 times, trying to make sense of it. 6 alphas, 6 thrones. It sounded like the fever dreams of a pregnant woman, not prophecy. And yet her mother had believed it enough to run to hide, to build a life in Silver Creek where she'd known they would never truly be safe. She'd believed it enough to die protecting Lyra from the rogues who'd somehow tracked them, despite years of careful concealment. Lyra closed the journal and added another branch to the fire. The flames cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, making shapes that looked almost like wolves mid-transformation caught between human and beast. She fell asleep thinking about her mother's words. about destiny and prophecy, and the impossible weight of expectations from a woman she'd never get to ask about any of this. She woke to the sound of footsteps. Three shapes moved through the pre-dawn darkness, spreading out to surround the cave entrance. Rogues, she could smell them now. The distinctive scent of wolves who'd gone too long without pack structure, who'd let the beast side consume too much of their humanity. Lyra's heart hammered against her ribs. She had the knife Dorothy had packed, but that would barely slow down one rogue, much less three. Her only advantage was the cave entrance, narrow enough that they'd have to come at her one at a time. It wouldn't be enough. The largest of the three stepped into the firelight's dying glow. He was massive, even in human form, with matted dark hair and eyes that held more wolf than man. When he smiled, his teeth were already shifting, elongating into fangs designed for tearing flesh. Well, well, alone Omega, how thoughtful of Silver Creek to provide breakfast. His companions laughed, moving closer. Lyra pulled the knife from her pack, her hands steady despite the terror flooding her system. If she was going to die, she would die fighting. Her mother hadn't raised a coward. Stay back, she warned. The rogue Alpha, because that's what he clearly was, the leader of this small feral pack, tilted his head. Or what, little Omega, you'll scratch me with your tiny knife. Please do, I like my meals with some fight in them. He lunged. Lyra didn't think. She reacted. Her hands shifted, bones cracking and reforming in less than a second, the knife clattering away as curved black claws extended from her fingertips. Claws strong enough to tear through flesh and sinew. She'd never used them in actual combat before. Had only practiced on training dummies under Dorothy's supervision, always careful, always controlled, always afraid of what it might mean if she truly let go. She let go. The rogue Alpha's momentum carried him straight onto her claws. They punched through his chest with a wet sound that would haunt her later, if she lived long enough for later to matter. His eyes went wide with shock as he looked down at the three claw buried in his sternum, dark blood already spreading across his shirt. Impossible, he wheezed. Omegas can't. Lyra ripped her claws free and shoved him backward. He collapsed, gasping as his two companions stared in shock. Then they attacked together. What followed was chaos. Lyra had no formal combat training, just instinct and desperation, and the selective shifting abilities she'd spent a lifetime being told were useless. She dodged the first attacker's lunge, raked her claws across his arm deep enough to make him howl. The second caught her from behind, and she shifted her jaw just enough to sink human but sharper teeth into the hand gripping her shoulder. He screamed and released her. She spun, claws extended, and caught him across the face. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to send him stumbling back, blood streaming from 4 parallel gashes. Both rogues hesitated, reassessing. The Omega they'd thought would be easy prey had just killed their Alpha and wounded both of them. Their beast instincts warred with their human intelligence, trying to decide if the kill was worth the cost. Lyra made the decision for them. She shifted her eyes, let them glow with the amber fire that came with partial transformation, and snarled with a voice that carried more wolf than she'd known she was capable of. Run! They ran. Lyra stood in the cave entrance, chest heaving, covered in blood that was mostly not hers, and watched them disappear into the forest. Her hands were still shifted, claws gleaming red in the growing dawn light. She'd killed someone. The rogue Alpha lay dead at her feet, his blood pooling on the stone, and she'd killed him. The reality of it hit her like a physical blow, and she turned and vomited into the bushes until there was nothing left in her stomach. When the shaking finally stopped, she forced herself to think practically. The body would attract scavengers, maybe more rogues. She couldn't stay here. Lyra gathered her pack with trembling hands, doused the fire, and started north again. Her mother's journal stayed at the top of the pack, that passage about 6 Alphas echoing in her mind. She'd survived one night. She had to survive 2 more. The second day brought new challenges. The terrain grew rougher as she climbed higher into the mountains, following game trails that sometimes disappeared entirely. Her legs ached. Her stomach growled despite the dried meat. Every sound made her jump, expecting more rogues, expecting Silver Creek enforcers, expecting death from a dozen different directions. But the wilderness remained indifferent to her suffering. The sun rose and set. The wind blew cold from the peaks. The aspens shed their golden leaves like tears, and Lyra kept walking north. By the second night, she was too exhausted to build a fire. She found another small cave, ate the last of her dried meat, and collapsed into sleep so deep that not even dreams could reach her. Dawn of the third day broke clear and cold. Frost covered the ground in delicate crystals that crunched under her feet as she resumed her march north. The air smelled different here, sharp with pine, and something else, something wild and dangerous and ancient. She was getting close to Nightfang territory. Lyra pushed herself harder, ignoring the burning in her muscles, the emptiness in her stomach, the cuts on her hands from scrambling over rocky terrain. If Dorothy was right, if Fang was different, if their alpha truly understood the old bloodlines, then maybe, just maybe, she had a chance. The attack came without warning. One moment she was alone on the trail. The next three massive shapes exploded from the forest on either side, wolves, fully shifted. Each one easily twice her size with fur that ranged from midnight black to silver gray. Patrol, Lyra froze. Running would be suicide. Fighting would be equally pointless. These weren't rogues. These were trained warriors moving with the kind of coordinated precision that spoke of years fighting together. The black wolf growled a sound that vibrated through her chest, then it shifted. The transformation was beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Bones cracking and reforming fur, retracting limbs, lengthening from animal to human in the space of heartbeats. Where the wolf had stood now stood a man. He was tall, maybe 6'3", with dark hair and eyes like molten silver. Scars marked his chest and arms, the kind earned in real combat, and when he moved, it was with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in their own deadly capabilities. "You're on Fang territory," he said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "State your name and business." Lyra tried to speak, but her throat had gone dry. 3 days of little food, less water, constant fear, and the confrontation with the rogues had taken their toll. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. She swayed on her feet. "I'm Lyra Sylvain, from Silver Creek Pack." I was told. Her legs gave out. Strong arms caught her before she hit the ground. The dark-haired man held her with surprising gentleness for someone who looked like he could tear her apart without effort. "She's burning up," another voice said. A second patrol member had shifted, this one with white-streaked hair and ice-blue eyes. "Fever, infected wounds probably, and she's severely dehydrated." "Silver Creek," the first man said thoughtfully. "That's 4 days south. How did an Omega make it this far alone?" "Doesn't matter right now," a third voice chimed in, young and concerned. "She needs medical attention or she's not going to make it." The dark-haired man's arms tightened around her. Lyra tried to focus on his face, but the black spots were multiplying, consuming her vision. "What's your name?" she managed to whisper. "Need to know. Who caught me?" His silver eyes met hers and something passed between them. A recognition, a pull, something that made her Omega instincts sit up and take notice despite her body's shutdown. "Kale," he said quietly. "My name is Kale Thornwood. I'm—" The rest was lost as darkness finally claimed her. The last thing she registered was his scent. Pine and winter storms and something else, something that made her wolf side purr with satisfaction even as consciousness slipped away. Made her instincts whispered, "Mine." Then nothing. Lyra woke to warmth. After 3 nights of cold stone and colder fear, the sensation was so foreign that for a moment she thought she'd died, that the rogues had killed her after all, or the fever had taken her, and this gentle heat was whatever came after. Then she felt the softness beneath her body. A mattress. Real blankets, not the thin survival blanket from Dorothy's pack. The scent of clean linen and something herbal medicinal, carefully chosen to promote healing. She was in a bed. Lyra's eyes opened, slowly adjusting to soft lamplight. The room around her was small but well-appointed, with log walls that gleamed with polish and a stone fireplace where flames crackled peacefully. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, their familiar scents grounding her: sage for purification, chamomile for calm, arnica for bruising. A healing room. Memory returned in fragments. The patrol, the dark-haired man with silver eyes. Kale Thornwood, he'd said his name was. She collapsed in his arms, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion and infection and 3 days of survival on the edge of death. "You're awake." The voice came from a chair beside the bed, and Lyra turned her head to find its source. An older woman sat watching her with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing. She was 68, with silver hair pulled back in an elegant knot, and hands that bore the calluses of a lifetime working with herbs and medicine. She wore simple clothing, but something in the way she held herself spoke of authority earned through years of service. "Easy," the woman said when Lyra tried to sit up. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. Your body needs rest." "Where am I?" "Fang territory, the Pack's healing house specifically." The woman rose and moved to a small table where a pitcher of water sat waiting. She poured a cup and brought it to Lyra, supporting her shoulders while she drank. "My name is Dorothy Hartwell. I'm the head healer here." Lyra choked on the water. "Dorothy, but you were— I just saw you." "In Silver Creek, yes." Dorothy's smile was gentle as she helped Lyra lie back against the pillows. That was a different Dorothy, child. Dorothy White Cloud, if I remember correctly. Fine healer taught by her grandmother. But not me. I don't understand. Dorothy is a common enough name among healers, has been for generations. The older woman settled back into her chair. But I suspect my namesake sent you north for a reason. She's one of the few in Silver Creek who remembers the old ways, the old bloodlines. She would have recognized what you are. What I am, Lyra repeated bitterly. Defective. Gifted. Dorothy's voice carried absolute certainty. The Sylvain bloodline isn't weakness, child. It's power that the packs have chosen to forget because it threatened their hierarchies. Selective shifting, perfect control, the ability to take exactly what you need from your wolf form without the vulnerability of full transformation. She leaned forward, her gray eyes intense. You killed a rogue alpha with your gift. Kale found the body on his way back from patrol. A full-grown male dead from a single strike to the chest. How many full-shift warriors can claim such a kill? The memory made Lyra's stomach turn. I didn't want to kill him. But you did what was necessary to survive. That's strength, not weakness. Dorothy pulled a leather journal from her apron pocket, and Lyra recognized it with a jolt. Her mother's journal, the one she'd been carrying in her pack. You went through my things. I examined them to understand what I was treating, Dorothy corrected. And I found this. Your mother was wise to document what she knew. The Selene Pack's history deserves to be remembered, not erased by propaganda and fear. Lyra wanted to argue, wanted to defend her privacy, but exhaustion pulled at her like a tide. Why are you helping me? I'm just an exiled Omega from another pack. Because 40 years ago, I was in a very similar position to yours. War prize, they called me. Spoils of conquest. I was brought to Night Fang territory, expecting slavery, at best death, at worst. Dorothy's expression softened with old memories. Instead, I found a pack that valued healers regardless of how they came to be here. I found purpose. I found home. And you think I'll find the same? I think the moon goddess has a sense of humor. Dorothy stood and moved to the window, pulling back thick curtains to reveal morning sunlight. You collapsed into the arms of Night Fang's alpha child, Cale Thornwood himself. And from what he told me when he brought you in, something interesting happened when he caught you. Lyra's heart began to pound. What do you mean, the connection? Dorothy turned to face her and her smile was knowing. It snapped into place. Not just for him, for 5 others as well. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. Rare, yes. Impossible, no. Dorothy returned to her chair and fixed Lyra with that penetrating stare. The old texts speak of it. When a wolf of significant power meets their true match, sometimes the bond splits, multiplies. 6 alphas, 1 omega. It's been 300 years since the last recorded case, but the magic hasn't forgotten, even if the wolves have. Lyra's mind reeled. The connection with Thorn had been painful enough when he rejected it. The thought of 6 bonds, 6 ties, 6 alphas, who could all potentially reject her the way he had. I can't, she whispered. I can't go through that again. No one's asking you to accept anything right now. Dorothy's voice gentled. You're healing. You're safe. The rest can wait until you're strong enough to face it. A knock at the door interrupted them. Dorothy rose to answer it, and Lyra heard low voices conferring in the hallway. When the healer returned, she carried a tray laden with food that made Lyra's stomach growl audibly. Eat, Dorothy commanded, setting the tray across Lyra's lap. Real food, not dried meat and desperation. You need to rebuild your strength. The meal was simple but perfect: venison stew rich with root vegetables, fresh bread still warm from the oven, sliced apples with honey, and more water flavored with herbs that tasted of mint and healing. Lyra ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered what real nourishment felt like. Dorothy watched with approval. Good. The fever broke during the night, and your infected wounds are responding to treatment. Another few days of rest and proper food, and you'll be functional again. And then you meet them. Properly, I mean. All 6. Anxiety spiked through Lyra's chest. I don't want to meet anyone. I don't want connections or alphas or any of it. I just want to be left alone. Understandable given what you've been through. Dorothy began clearing away the empty dishes. But the pull doesn't care about what you want, child. It exists whether you acknowledge it or not. And those 6 men out there are going absolutely insane knowing their mate is behind this door and they can't see her. Let them suffer, Lyra said bitterly. Dorothy laughed a sound like wind chimes. Oh, I like you. You've got spine. She paused at the door. But consider this, these men didn't ask for the connection either. They were on routine patrol when it hit them like lightning. All 6 of them simultaneously for the first time in their lives. They're just as confused and overwhelmed as you are. They're alphas. They'll get over it. Will they? Dorothy's expression turned serious. The link isn't a small thing, Lyra. It's the moon goddess's gift, her way of showing wolves where they truly belong. Fight it if you must, but know that you're fighting against divine will itself. And the goddess, she added with a slight smile, has a way of ensuring her will is done whether we cooperate or not. She left before Lyra could respond, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt ominous. Lyra lay back against the pillows, her mind churning. 6 alphas, 6 connections. It sounded like something from the old stories, the legends her mother used to tell, about wolves blessed by the goddess herself. It sounded like a fairy tale. And fairy tales, Lyra had learned, usually ended with someone getting hurt. The next 3 days passed in a haze of healing and deliberate solitude. Dorothy came and went with meals and medicine, checking Lyra's wounds and pronouncing her recovery satisfactory. Other healers occasionally appeared, younger women who treated her with careful courtesy but didn't push for conversation. No one mentioned the 6 alphas, but Lyra could feel them. The pull was like a constant hum beneath her skin, an awareness of presences just beyond her perception. Sometimes she'd catch a scent on the wind when Dorothy opened the windows, pine and winter storm smoke and spiced wine earth and growing things. 6 distinct scents that made her omega instincts perk up with interest no matter how firmly she tried to suppress them. On the 4th morning, Dorothy arrived with her breakfast and an announcement. You're well enough to leave the healing house today. Lyra's hand froze halfway to her mouth, bread and honey forgotten. Leave and go where? That's what we need to discuss. Dorothy settled into her usual chair. You have options, child. Night Fang isn't like Silver Creek. We don't exile wolves for being different, and we don't force anyone into bonds they don't want. Really? Skepticism dripped from the word. Really? You can choose to acknowledge the pull, meet the alphas, see if this is something you want to explore. Or, Dorothy continued before Lyra could interrupt, you can request asylum as a refugee from Silver Creek and live here as a pack member without any tie to the alphas beyond normal pack hierarchy. They'll respect that choice. Just like that 6 alphas feel a connection and they'll just ignore it. It will hurt them, Dorothy said honestly. Badly. The tie doesn't fade just because one party refuses it. But they're honorable men, Lyra. They won't force anything on you. The words so closely echoed what Thorn had said, what Thorn had promised before he rejected her in front of the entire pack, that Lyra felt her chest tighten with old pain. Dorothy must have seen something in her expression because her voice gentled. Whoever hurt you before, whatever happened in Silver Creek, it wasn't your fault. You know that, don't you? Do I? Lyra set down the bread, appetite gone. I was rejected because I'm defective, because I can't shift properly, because I'm weak and broken and... Stop. Dorothy's command cut through the spiral of self-hatred. Stop repeating the lies they told you. You are none of those things. You survived 3 days alone in the wilderness. You killed a rogue alpha in self-defense. You made it to Night Fang territory when any normal Omega would have died on the first night. She leaned forward, gripping Lyra's hands. The wolf who rejected you was a fool who couldn't see value when it was right in front of him. Don't let his blindness become your truth. Lyra wanted to believe her, desperately wanted to accept that maybe possibly she wasn't everything Silver Creek had told her she was. But 21 years of conditioning didn't disappear in 4 days of kindness. I'll meet them, she heard herself say, the alphas, but I have conditions. Dorothy's smile was approving. Smart girl. What are your terms? 30 days. Lyra said, the number coming to her instinctively. A trial period. I'll stay in Night Fang territory. I'll meet these alphas. I'll see if the bond is real or just proximity. But at the end of 30 days, if I want to leave, they let me go. No questions, no pursuit, no forced claiming. Agreed on their behalf. What else? No permanent marks until I consent. I've heard the stories about alpha claiming bites. Nothing like that happens without my explicit permission. Agreed. Continue. Lyra took a deep breath. I want training, combat politics, healing, advancement, whatever skills this pack values. I'm not going to be just a decorative mate who sits quietly while others make decisions. If I stay here, I contribute. I prove my worth through more than just biology. Agreed, and I think they'll be pleased to hear that. Anything else? Respect. Lyra met Dorothy's eyes squarely. Not ownership, not possession. If this bond is real, if it's from the moon goddess, like you say, then it should be a partnership. Equal. I won't be anyone's property ever again. Dorothy stood and extended her hand. Those terms are more than fair. I'll convey them to the Alphas and arrange a meeting for this evening. That gives you the day to rest and prepare. They shook on it, and Lyra tried not to notice how her hands trembled slightly. 6 Alphas. What had she just agreed to? Evening came too quickly. Dorothy returned at sunset with clothing that actually fit soft leather pants, a tunic in deep forest green, and boots that were worn but well made. Nothing fancy but clean and practical, and worlds better than the torn, blood-stained outfit she'd arrived in. The meeting will be in the Pax Common Hall, Dorothy explained as she helped Lyra dress. Neutral territory. The Alphas requested somewhere you might feel less trapped than a private room. Thoughtful of them, Lyra said, trying to keep the tremor from her voice. They're trying. Dorothy finished lacing up the tunic and stepped back to examine her handiwork. Perfect. You look like a wolf who knows her own worth, not a supplicant begging for scraps. Lyra studied herself in the small mirror Dorothy provided. Her white blonde hair had been cleaned and braided. Her pale skin had regained some color, and the green tunic brought out the color in her eyes. She looked alive. More alive than she'd felt in months, maybe years. She looked like someone worth fighting for. The thought both terrified and thrilled her. The walk through Nightfang territory revealed a pack unlike anything Lyra had experienced in Silver Creek. The buildings were well maintained, the paths clean and well marked. Wolves moved about their evening business with purpose, and when they passed Lyra and Dorothy, they nodded respectfully, rather than sneering or looking away. No one whispered about the defective Omega. The common hall was a massive log structure at the heart of the territory with enormous windows that let in the last rays of sunset. Inside, a fire burned in a hearth large enough to roast an entire elk. The walls were decorated with carvings that told the pack's history in wood and stone. And at the far end, around a large wooden table, sat 6 men who all turned to look at her simultaneously. The connection flared to life like someone had struck a match against her soul. Lyra's breath caught as she really felt it, for the first time now that she wasn't half dead from fever and exhaustion. 6 distinct threads, each one pulling her toward a different man, each one singing with recognition and need in mind. Her Omega instincts wanted to run to them, to throw herself into their arms, to accept the bond and let it wash away all the pain and fear and loneliness. Her rational mind wanted to run in the opposite direction. She did neither. She stood very still while Dorothy moved to make introductions. Gentlemen, the healer said formally, may I present Lyra Sylvain of the Selene bloodline refugee from Silver Creek Pack. The man Lyra recognized from the patrol stood first. Cale Thornwood was somehow even more imposing in the firelight, those metallic eyes reflecting flames. He wore simple clothing, but authority radiated from him like heat. Lyra, he said, and just her name on his lips made the connection vibrate. Thank you for agreeing to meet us. I know this situation is unusual. Unprecedented, corrected a man to Cale's right. He was slightly older, with scars crossing his face in a pattern that spoke of serious combat. His eyes were dark and assessing. I'm Darius Ironfang, head warrior. The last recorded 6-way bond was in 1724. A younger man with unusual amber eyes and a gentle smile stood next. Finn Ravenclaw, pack diplomat and apparently 1/6 of your bond. He moved with fluid grace, his scent carrying notes of earth and growing things. For what it's worth, we're just as surprised as you are. Rowan Steelback, this from a stocky man with a warrior's build and hands that looked like they could crush stone. Enforcer, I handle pack security and discipline. A man with white-streaked hair and ice-blue eyes nodded from his position near the fire. Storm Winterborn, intelligence and strategy. His voice was cool, analytical, but something warm flickered in his gaze when it met hers. The last man stood slowly, and Lyra felt her breath catch. He was beautiful in an almost otherworldly way, with dark hair and eyes that seemed to see straight through her defenses. Ash Nightshade, I serve as pack healer and counselor. His voice was soft, soothing, carrying an undertone of genuine concern. How are you feeling? Dorothy says you're recovering well, but I'd like to examine you myself if you'll allow it. I'm fine, Lyra managed, though her voice sounded strange to her own ears. She has conditions, Dorothy announced, moving to stand beside Lyra in a show of support. Terms for this trial period you're all so eager to begin. Cale gestured to an empty chair at the table. Please, sit. Tell us what you need. Lyra forced herself to move to walk to that chair with her spine straight and her head high. She would not cower. She would not beg. She would negotiate like she had value because Dorothy was right, she did. 30 days, she said once she was seated, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. A trial period to see if this bond is real or just biological coincidence. At the end of 30 days, if I choose to leave you, let me go. No pursuit, no forced claiming. The six alphas exchanged glances, something passing between them in that silent communication that pack members developed over years of working together. Agreed, Kale said finally, though I should note that the link will remain whether you stay or go. It doesn't fade with distance or denial. I understand. Second condition, no permanent marks until I explicitly consent. I control when and if any claiming happens. Agreed, Ash said immediately. Your body, your choice, always. The casual certainty in his voice made something tight in Lyra's chest loosen slightly. Third, I want training, combat politics, healing, whatever skills this pack values. I won't be decorative. I contribute. Gladly, Darius said with what might have been approval. Someone who can defend herself is infinitely preferable to one we have to constantly protect. And finally, Lyra met each of their gazes in turn. Respect, partnership, not ownership. If this bond is from the moon goddess, then it should be between equals. I won't be anyone's possession. Silence fell over the table. The six alphas looked at each other again, and Lyra braced herself for rejection, for anger, for the condescending explanations about how alphas and omegas naturally fell into hierarchies and she was being unreasonable. Instead, Kale smiled. Those terms, he said slowly, are exactly what we hope to hear. Lyra blinked. They are, we don't want a possession, Lyra. Finn leaned forward, his amber eyes warm. We want a partner. Someone who chooses to be here, who brings their own strength to the pack, who stands beside us rather than behind us. The six-way bond suggests the moon goddess has plans for you, Storm added, his analytical voice carrying a hint of fascination. Plans that require you to be powerful in your own right, not diminished to serve our egos. We agreed to all your conditions, Kale said formally. 30 days, no permanent marks without consent, full training access, and equal partnership. We'll put it in writing if you prefer, witnessed by Dorothy and the Pack Council. Lyra's head spun. This was nothing like what she'd expected. Where was the dominance, the demands, the insistence that omegas existed to serve alphas? Yes, in writing, please. Rowan fetched the contract materials, Kale directed. The enforcer rose and moved to a cabinet against the wall, returning with parchment, ink, and wax seal. Within minutes, they drafted a formal agreement that laid out every term Lyra had requested. 6 alphas signed it. Then Dorothy up as witness. Finally, with hands that shook only slightly, Lyra added her own signature. Legally binding, a contract that gave her power, protection, and choice. She'd never had anything like it before. So, Ash said once the ink had dried and the document was sealed, now that business is concluded, would you like to have dinner with us as people getting to know each other, not as alphas and omega, performing some mating ritual? Lyra hesitated, every instinct still screaming that this was a trap, that kindness was just a prelude to cruelty. But her stomach growled audibly, and Finn laughed. I think your body has made the decision for you, he said with a grin. Come on. Dorothy's been hoarding the good venison, and I convinced the pack cook to make berry pie. The meal that followed was surreal in its normalcy. The 6 alphas treated her like a person, not a prize to be won. They asked about her healing training, her favorite books, her opinions on pack politics. They shared stories about Nightfang territory, about challenges they'd faced and victories they'd won. They made her laugh. Lyra couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed at a dinner table. In Silver Creek, meals had been tense affairs where she ate quickly and left before anyone could comment on her presence. Here, surrounded by 6 men who looked at her like she mattered, laughter came easier than it should have. You're selective shifting, Darius said during a lull in conversation. Dorothy mentioned you killed a rogue alpha with it. Would you be willing to demonstrate not the killing part? He added quickly when Lyra tensed. Just the shift itself. I've never seen it before. Lyra looked at her hands, at the fingers that could become claws and heartbeats. In Silver Creek, she'd hidden this ability, ashamed of the proof of her defect. Here Darius was asking to see it like it was impressive. Okay, she said quietly. She focused the way her mother had taught her years ago, reaching for just the wolf aspect she needed. Her right hand shifted, bones cracking and reforming with practiced ease. Black claws extended from her fingertips, curved and deadly sharp. Her left hand remained fully human. The alphas stared. Goddess above, Storm breathed. You can control it that precisely. I can shift individual body parts, Lyra explained, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Claws, eyes, ears, enhanced senses. just not the full wolf form. That's not a defect, Kale said, his gaze intense. That's a tactical advantage. In combat, full shifting leaves you vulnerable during the transformation. You can adapt instantly to whatever the situation requires. Plus, you can use weapons. Rowan added, his warrior's mind clearly working through applications. A shifted wolf can't grip a knife or fire a gun. You could fight with claws and still operate human tools. And the sensory enhancements, Ash said thoughtfully. Enhanced hearing without full shift means you could gather intelligence in human form without anyone knowing you were using wolf abilities. They were seeing value where Silver Creek had seen only weakness, finding strength in the exact trait that had marked her as defective. Lyra shifted her hand back to human form, blinking against the sudden burning in her eyes. She would not cry. She absolutely would not cry in front of these men. Thank you, she managed, for seeing it differently than my old pack did. Your old pack, Finn said gently, was blind. Their loss is very much our gain. The evening continued comfortable and strange in equal measure. When exhaustion finally pulled at Lyra despite her best efforts to hide it, Ash noticed immediately. You need rest, he said, pushing back from the table. You're still recovering. Dorothy, will you take her back to the healing house? She can't stay there forever, Storm pointed out. She needs proper quarters if she's going to be here for 30 days. Kale nodded. There's a cabin on the eastern edge of Pack territory, small but private. It was Elder Margaret's before she passed last winter. It's been maintained, but no one's claimed it yet. Would that be acceptable? Lyra, her own cabin, private space where she could retreat, think, process everything that was happening. Yes, thank you. We'll have it provisioned tomorrow, Rowan said. Food, firewood, anything you need. And if you need anything tonight, Ash added, Dorothy knows how to reach us. Any of us. He paused, seeming to search for words. We're here. However you need us to be. Dorothy guided her back to the healing house through the quiet night, her presence a steady comfort. When they reached Lyra's room, the older woman helped her change into sleeping clothes and tucked her into bed like she was a child. You did well tonight, Dorothy said softly. Standing up for yourself, setting boundaries. Your mother would be proud. Lyra struggled for the right word. Different than what I expected. Nightfang values strength in all its forms. Always has. Dorothy moved toward the door, then paused. The connection will get stronger, you know. The more time you spend with them, the harder it will be to ignore. Just be prepared for that. What if I can't do this? The question burst out before Lyra could stop it. What if I'm too broken from what happened in Silver Creek? What if I ruin this before it even starts? Dorothy returned to the bedside and cupped Lyra's face with gentle hands. Then you'll heal and you'll try again. That's what survivors do, child. We get knocked down, we bleed, we cry, and then we stand back up and keep fighting. She pressed a kiss to Lyra's forehead. Sleep now. Tomorrow starts your 30 days. Make them count. Lyra lay awake long after Dorothy left, staring at the ceiling and feeling 6 distinct presences through the pull. 6 alphas who'd agreed to her terms without argument, who'd seen value in her supposed defect, who'd made her laugh, who might possibly see her as something other than broken. For the first time since Thorne's rejection, Lyra allowed herself to feel something dangerous. Hope. Day 5 dawned cold and clear, frost painting delicate patterns across the window of the cabin that was now temporarily at least Lyra's home. She'd moved in the previous afternoon with Dorothy's help, finding the space exactly as promised. Small but comfortable, with a main room, dominated by a stone fireplace, a sleeping loft accessible by a sturdy ladder, and a kitchen area stocked with enough supplies to last weeks. Someone had left wildflowers in a clay vase on the table, their purple and gold petals bright against the rough wood. She suspected Finn. Now standing in her new kitchen and watching the sunrise over the mountains through windows that faced east, Lyra tried to process the fact that she'd agreed to 30 days of this. 30 days of proximity to 6 alphas who made her omega instincts sing. 30 days of pretending she wasn't terrified of getting hurt again. 30 days to figure out if the moon goddess's plan for her life made any sense at all. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Darius Ironfang stood on her small porch dressed in training leathers and carrying 2 wooden practice swords. Dawnlight caught the scars on his face, turning them silver. His eyes assessed her with the kind of professional evaluation that had nothing to do with bonds and everything to do with a warrior sizing up a potential student. You requested combat training, he said without preamble. I'm here to provide it, unless you'd prefer to ease into your first day with something less physically demanding. Lyra thought about the rogue Alpha, about the wet sound her claws had made punching through his chest, about the way his two companions had looked at her with sudden fear when they realized she could fight back. No, she said firmly, I need to learn how to defend myself properly. What happened in the forest was luck and desperation. Next time I might not be so fortunate. Something that might have been approval flickered across Darius's scarred face. Good answer, get dressed for movement. Meet me at the training grounds in 20 minutes. And Lyra, he paused, his expression serious. Don't eat a large breakfast. You're going to be moving hard and you'll regret it if your stomach is full. He was gone before she could respond, his footsteps crunching away through frost-crisp grass. 23 minutes later, Lyra arrived at a large cleared space on the western edge of packed territory, surrounded by tall pines. Targets for archery practice stood at one end. A sparring ring had been marked out with stones at the other. Weapons racks lined one side. Darius waited in the center of the sparring ring. He'd stripped down to just pants and boots despite the morning chill, his torso marked with scars that told stories of a lifetime spent fighting. Before we begin, he said as Lyra approached, I need to understand your current skill level. Have you had any formal combat training? No, just instinct, and what I learned from killing that rogue. Instinct kept you alive. Training will make you dangerous. Darius moved to the center of the ring and gestured for her to join him. First lesson, your size is a disadvantage in strength, but an advantage in speed. You'll never overpower a full-grown male wolf, so don't try. Instead, you learn to be faster, more precise, and significantly harder to hit. He began moving, then demonstrating basic stances with the kind of fluid grace that came from decades of practice. Lyra watched, trying to absorb the way he distributed his weight, the angle of his feet, the position of his hands. Your turn, Darius said. Show me. Lyra attempted to mimic his stance. Immediately, he was there adjusting her feet with gentle taps, correcting her hip angle, with impersonal touches, raising her chin with one finger. Better, again. They spent an hour on nothing but stances and footwork. How to move, how to balance, how to shift her weight to avoid attacks, rather than trying to block them directly. It was exhausting and frustrating and completely absorbing. Enough, he finally said. Rest. Drink water. We'll move to actual sparring in a moment. Lyra collapsed onto the stone boundary of the ring, her legs shaking. Darius handed her a water skin, and she drank gratefully while he studied her with those assessing dark eyes. You're stronger than you look, he observed. Good muscle endurance. Your balance needs work, but that will come with practice. I feel like I'm going to fall over. That means you're learning. He offered her a hand and pulled her to her feet with easy strength. Now we see how you handle actual combat. I'm going to attack you slowly with clear telegraphing. Your job is to avoid, not block. Remember, you're faster than me. Use it. What followed was a careful dance of attack and evasion. Darius moved with controlled precision, each strike obvious enough that Lyra could see it coming. At first she stumbled, failed, took glancing blows that would have been devastating if he'd been using full force. But gradually something clicked. Her body remembered the movements he'd taught her. She began to anticipate, to read his body language, to move before the strike fully formed. And then instinct took over. Darius swung at her head, and Lyra ducked her hands, shifting to claws without conscious thought. She swept his legs, using her low center of gravity as an advantage, exactly like he'd taught. He went down, and she was on him, claws at his throat, before either of them realized what had happened. They froze. Darius looked up at her, at the black claws resting against his jugular, and smiled. Outstanding. That's exactly what I wanted to see. You let your wolf help you without fully shifting. That's your advantage, Lyra. Use it. She shifted her hands back to human form and scrambled off him, suddenly aware that she was straddling an alpha's chest, that the connection was singing with approval at the proximity. Darius rose smoothly, unbothered by being taken down by someone half his size. Your selective shifting is going to make you a nightmare to fight once you're properly trained. Your opponents won't know how to read you. Can't predict if you're fighting human or wolf because you'll be both. Really, Lyra heard the desperate hope in her own voice and hated it. Really. Darius's expression turned serious. Silver Creek told you that inability to full shift was weakness. They were wrong. What you have is tactical flexibility that full shift wolves can't match. We're going to weaponize it. He spent the next hour teaching her how to use her claws in combination with human combat techniques. How to rake rather than punch, how to use her smaller size to get inside an opponent's guard, how to shift just her jaw for a devastating bite when grappled. By the time he called an end to the session, Lyra was exhausted, bruised, and exhilarated in a way she'd never experienced. Same time tomorrow, Darius said as they left the training grounds. Every day for the next 30. By the end of your trial period, you'll be able to defend yourself against most threats. Thank you, Lyra managed, for not treating me like I'm fragile. You survived 3 days alone in the wilderness and killed a rogue alpha. You're not fragile. He paused at the fork in the path. You're untrained. There's a difference. Untrained can be fixed. He left her there, and Lyra made her way back to her cabin with legs that felt like water and a heart that felt impossibly lighter. She'd barely had time to clean up and change clothes when another knock came at her door. Ash Nightshade stood on her porch carrying a leather satchel that clinked with the sound of glass bottles. His dark hair was pulled back in a low tail, and his eyes held the kind of gentle concern that made Lyra's defenses want to crumble. I heard you trained with Darius this morning, he said. I brought salve for the bruises and arnica tincture for the muscle soreness. I'm fine. Lyra started to protest, but Ash was already moving past her into the cabin with the kind of professional authority that healers everywhere seem to possess. You're not fine. You're a healer yourself, so you know better than to lie to me about injuries. He set his satchel on the table and began unpacking supplies with practiced efficiency. Sit. Let me examine you. There was something in his voice, some combination of alpha command and healer's concern that made obedience automatic. Lyra sat. Ash's hands were gentle as he checked her over his touch, impersonal, despite the way the pull hummed at every point of contact. He found bruises she hadn't even noticed yet, places where Darius's training strikes had landed harder than she'd realized. Nothing serious, he pronounced finally. But you'll want this salve tonight before bed, and take the arnica tincture twice daily for the next 3 days. It will help with inflammation and speed healing. He began preparing a dose of the tincture, measuring it into a small cup with precision. The liquid was dark and smelled bitter. Drink, he instructed, handing it to her. Lyra obeyed, making a face at the taste. Ash's lips quirked in a small smile. Not pleasant, I know, but effective. He settled into the chair across from her, his dark eyes studying her face. How are you really doing, Lyra? Not physically, emotionally. The question caught her off guard. I don't know what you mean. You were rejected and exiled from your birth pack less than a week ago. You nearly died in the wilderness. You woke up in strange territory to discover you have 6 connections with alphas you've never met. That's a tremendous amount of trauma and change in a very short time. Lyra's throat tightened. I'm coping. Coping isn't thriving. Ash leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. I'm a counselor as well as a healer, Lyra. It's literally my job to help pack members process difficult experiences. And what you've been through qualifies as difficult. I don't need counseling. I need to be strong. Strength includes knowing when to accept help. He paused, letting that sink in. Tell me about the rejection, if you're comfortable sharing. And somehow, despite every intention to keep her pain private, Lyra found herself talking. About Thorne's courtship, about the 3 months of hope, about the public ceremony where he'd declared her defective and unworthy. About Edgar's cruelty and the exile that was meant to be a death sentence. Ash listened without interrupting, his face carefully neutral, until she'd finished. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. What happened to you was abuse, he said quietly. Emotional abuse, public humiliation, and attempted murder by neglect. None of it was your fault. None of it was because you deserved it. It was because Thorne Blackwell is a coward who valued political advantage over honor. The words hit something deep in Lyra's chest, some knot of shame and self-blame that she hadn't even fully acknowledged was there. He said I was defective. He lied. Ash's grip on her hand tightened. Your selective shifting is a gift, not a defect. Lyra felt tears burning behind her eyes. I don't know how to believe that. I know. Healing from abuse takes time. Ash released her hand and stood moving to his satchel. He pulled out a small journal, its leather cover soft with age. I want you to try something. Every night before bed, write down 3 things that happened that day. They don't have to be big things, just moments. And then write how they made you feel. Why? Because trauma makes us focus on pain and fear. This exercise helps retrain your brain to notice other things. Joy, accomplishment, peace, whatever you experience. He set the journal on the table in front of her. Will you try it? Lyra picked up the journal, running her fingers over the cover. For how long? As long as it helps. There's no deadline. Ash packed up his supplies, slinging the satchel over his shoulder. I'll check on you in a few days. And Lyra, if you need to talk about anything, you know where to find me. After he left, Lyra sat for a long time holding the journal and thinking about what he'd said, about abuse and healing and learning to believe she had value. It felt impossible, but maybe that was the point. Maybe healing was supposed to feel impossible at first. She opened the journal to the first page and began to write. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm that was both exhausting and oddly comforting. Mornings belonged to Darius, combat training that left her bruised and sore but increasingly confident. By day 10, she could hold her own in a sparring match for almost 5 minutes before he pinned her. By day 12, she landed a strike that actually made him grunt with surprise. "You're a fast learner," he said after that session, rubbing his ribs where her claws had caught him. "Most students take months to land a clean hit on me." "Most students probably aren't fighting for their lives if they fail," Lyra pointed out. "True." Darius helped her to her feet. "But it's more than survival instinct. You have good combat intuition. Your body knows how to move even when your mind doubts. Trust that instinct more." Afternoons were split between Ash and Finn. Ash continued her healing education, teaching her techniques that went far beyond what she'd learned in Silver Creek. How to sense internal injuries through touch alone. How to identify poisons by scent. How to set bones and stitch wounds with the kind of precision that saved lives. "Your sensitivity is remarkable," he said during one lesson, watching her correctly identify a hairline fracture in a training dummy through touch alone. "Most healers need years to develop that level of diagnostic skill." With Finn, Lyra learned the more subtle art of pack diplomacy, how to read social situations, how to navigate council politics, how to speak with authority despite her Omega status. "Status is performance," Finn explained one afternoon while they observed a council meeting from the gallery. "Watch how Kale commands the room not through volume, but through certainty. He knows his worth, so everyone else believes it too." That's easy for an alpha," Lyra said, "especially one who's pack leader." "Is it?" Finn's amber eyes sparkled with amusement. Kale was challenged for leadership 3 times in his first year. He won not because he was the strongest fighter Storm could probably take him in combat, but because he convinced the pack he was the best choice to lead them. Perception became reality. He turned to face her fully. "You're performing Omega right now, small, quiet, uncertain. But I watched you pin Darius yesterday during training. I've seen you diagnose injuries that stumped Ash. You're not actually uncertain, Lyra. You're just used to making yourself small to survive." The observation struck deep. "How do I stop?" "Practice," Finn smiled. "Start with small things. Make eye contact longer. Speak without apologizing first. Take up space in a room instead of shrinking into corners. Eventually, the performance becomes real." Evenings were the hardest. That's when all 6 alphas would often gather at her cabin, bringing dinner and conversation and the overwhelming presence of the connections that grew stronger every day. Kale would ask about her training progress. Rowan would share stories about pack security that made her laugh. Storm would engage her in debates about strategy and tactics that challenged her thinking. And through it all, the pole hummed and sang, making it harder and harder to remember why she was supposed to keep her distance. On day 14, Lyra made her first entry in Ash's journal that wasn't about pain or fear. "Today," Darius said, "I'm ready to train with real weapons. Not just practice swords, but actual blades. He trusts me not to hurt myself or others." I felt proud, like maybe I'm becoming someone capable. On day 16, Finn introduced me to the Pack Council as Lyra Sylvain, healer and diplomat in training. Not Omega, not refugee, just my name and my skills. 3 council members asked me questions about healing techniques after the meeting. They listened to my answers like they mattered. On day 18, Storm taught me chess tonight. I lost every game, but he said I have good strategic instincts that just need refinement. He wants to play again tomorrow. I think I'm starting to understand why the Moon Goddess chose 6 mates instead of 1. They each see different parts of me, value different strengths. Together, they make me feel whole. Day 20 brought a shift that would change everything. Lyra was working with Ash in the healing house, learning advanced suturing techniques on practice models when a commotion erupted outside. Shouting, the sound of people running. Ash's head snapped up, his healer's instincts immediately alert. "Stay here," he ordered, already moving toward the door. Lyra ignored him and followed. The pack's main square had erupted into controlled chaos. Warriors formed a protective perimeter around something in the center, and Lyra could smell blood even from a distance. Fresh blood, a lot of it. She pushed through the crowd, her healer training overriding common sense until she reached the center. A young male, maybe 19 or 20, lay on the ground. His left leg was mangled bone visible through torn flesh, blood pooling beneath him in quantities that meant he'd die without immediate intervention. Ash was already there, kneeling beside the injured wolf, his hands moving with practiced speed. But even from where Lyra stood, she could see the problem. The femoral artery had been severed. The boy was bleeding out faster than normal healing could compensate. "I need pressure here," Ash snapped at the nearest warrior. "Now, someone get my full kit from the healing house. Move." Lyra moved instead, dropping to her knees on the boy's other side, her hands already reaching for the injury. "Where's the bleed?" "Femoral artery. Severed clean. He's got maybe 2 minutes before blood loss kills him." Ash's voice was controlled but tight. "I need to clamp the artery before I can repair it, but I can't find the damn thing in all this blood." "I can," Lyra said. She didn't wait for permission. She placed her hands on either side of the wound and closed her eyes, reaching for that diagnostic sense her mother had taught her. Feeling past the blood and torn flesh, sensing the pattern of damage, finding the severed artery by the absence of pulse below the injury. "There," she said, eyes still closed, 3 inches up from the main tear. "It's retracted into the muscle. You need to extend the incision and pull it forward to clamp it." Ash didn't question her. His hands moved exactly where she'd indicated, a clean cut that revealed the retracted artery. He clamped it with the precision of years of practice, and the bleeding immediately slowed to manageable levels. "Got it. Lyra, keep monitoring while I repair. Tell me if anything changes." They worked in tandem for the next 20 minutes, Ash's hands doing the physical work while Lyra's senses guided him to the damage he couldn't see. Repairing the artery, stabilizing bone fragments, cleaning the wound of debris that could cause infection. When it was done, the boy's breathing had steadied and his color was improving. He'd live. Ash sat back on his heels, his hands covered in blood, and looked at Lyra with something like awe. "You just saved his life. If we'd had to search for that artery traditionally, he would have bled out before we found it." Lyra looked down at her own bloody hands, at the boy who was already starting to heal, now that the critical injuries were stabilized, and felt something shift in her chest. She'd done this. Her gift, the one Silver Creek called a defect, had saved a life. "What happened?" she asked, finally looking around at the gathered crowd. "Rogue attack on the southern border." Kale's voice came from behind her. She turned to find all 6 alphas present, their faces grim. "We drove them off, but Marcus here got caught in the initial assault. Took a hit from a spiked club that shattered his femur and severed the artery." Storm stepped forward, his ice blue eyes sharp with assessment. "How did you know where the artery was? Even experienced healers need visual confirmation for that kind of precision." "I can sense it," Lyra said simply. "Internal injuries, blood flow, damage patterns. I just feel where things are wrong and where they're supposed to be." The 6 alphas exchanged glances, that silent communication that she was learning to recognize. "That's a rare gift," Ash said quietly. "Diagnostic sensing at that level. I've read about it in the old texts, but I've never seen it in person." "The Selene bloodline," Kale murmured, and there was something in his voice that made Lyra look at him sharply. "The old records mention it. Selective shifting and enhanced healing senses. Both traits of the moon goddess's chosen guards." Before Lyra could respond, a woman pushed through the crowd. She was in her 40s with the same dark hair as the injured boy, her face streaked with tears. "Marcus?" she sobbed, dropping to her knees beside her son. "Oh, goddess, Marcus." "He's stable," Ash said gently. "Thanks to Lyra. She found the bleed when I couldn't." The woman looked at Lyra, really looked at her, and then did something Lyra had never experienced before. She reached out and pulled Lyra into a fierce embrace. "Thank you," she whispered against Lyra's hair. "Thank you for saving my boy." Lyra stood frozen, unsure how to respond to gratitude that felt too large for what she'd done. But the woman's arms around her, the genuine appreciation, the recognition that she'd helped, it cracked something open inside her chest that had been locked tight since Thorne's rejection. She'd saved a life. She had value beyond biology, beyond bonds, beyond anything Silver Creek had ever acknowledged. That night, Lyra's journal entry was different. "Today, I saved someone's life. Used my diagnostic sensing to find a severed artery that would have killed Marcus Ironfoot if we couldn't locate it fast enough." His mother hugged me. The pack members who witnessed it looked at me with respect, not pity or disgust. Kale said I have the gifts of the Selene bloodline, selective shifting and enhanced healing senses. He said it like it was valuable. Like I was valuable. I'm starting to believe him. 10 days remain in my trial period. I thought I'd be counting down the days until I could leave. Instead, I'm counting down the days until I have to make a choice I'm not sure I'm ready for. Because these 6 alphas are making it very hard to remember why I should protect my heart. Day 21 brought a different kind of challenge. Kale found her after morning training with Darius, those metallic eyes holding a question. Will you walk with me? There's something I want to show you. Lyra fell into step beside him, acutely aware of his presence, of the way the pull seemed to strengthen when they were alone together. He led her up a narrow trail that climbed the mountain behind packed territory, through pine forests that smelled of sap and earth. They didn't speak. The silence between them was comfortable, broken only by their footsteps and the distant calls of birds. After 30 minutes of climbing, they emerged onto a rocky overlook that offered a stunning view of the valley below. Nightfang territory spread out like a painting, with the pack's buildings nestled among the trees and smoke rising from 100 hearths. Beyond, the mountains marched away in waves of blue and purple, endless and ancient. This is my thinking place, Kale said, settling onto a flat boulder near the edge. When pack business gets overwhelming, when decisions feel too heavy, I come here. The perspective helps. Lyra sat beside him, careful to leave space between them, though the bond pulled at her to close that distance. It's beautiful. It is. Kale was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant peaks. I wanted to talk to you, away from the others, away from pack dynamics. Just you and me. Lyra's heart began to pound. About what? About the bond. About what comes after your 30 days. He turned to face her, and the intensity in those eyes made her breath catch. I know you're afraid. I know you've been hurt. And I know that 6 alphas appearing in your life when you're still healing from rejection is overwhelming at best, terrifying at worst. I'm coping, Lyra said, the automatic response. You're surviving. There's a difference. Kale shifted slightly closer, not touching, but near enough that she could feel his warmth. I want you to know something, Lyra. Whatever you decide at the end of 30 days, it won't change how we see you. You have value beyond the connection. You've proven that a dozen times over in the past 3 weeks. You say that now? I'll say it always. His voice was absolutely certain. You saved Marcus's life. You're holding your own in combat training with our head warrior. You're learning diplomacy and pack politics faster than most wolves who've lived here for years. You're valuable, Lyra. Not because the moon goddess chose you for us, but because of who you are. Lyra felt tears burning behind her eyes. Thorn was wrong. Kale reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face with one hand. He was a fool who couldn't recognize a gift when it was offered to him. His lost Lyra, not yours. The touch of his hand against her skin made the connection flare to life stronger than it had ever been. Lyra gasped at the intensity of it, at the way she could suddenly feel Kale's emotions as clearly as her own. His certainty, his admiration, his desire tempered with patience, his love. You love me, she whispered, shocked. Already. The bond doesn't wait for permission. Kale's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. I've loved you since the moment you collapsed into my arms on the border. I'll love you whether you choose to stay or leave. That's what these ties do. They simply are. I don't know if I can do this, Lyra admitted, her voice breaking. I don't know if I'm brave enough. You're the bravest person I know. Kale leaned his forehead against hers, the gesture intimate without being overwhelming. You survived exile. You killed a rogue alpha. You stood in front of 6 strange alphas and demanded respect on your own terms. That's not the behavior of someone who lacks courage. That's different. That was survival. So is this, just a different kind. Kale pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I'm not asking you to decide today. I'm not even asking you to decide in 9 days when your trial period ends. I'm just asking you to consider the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the moon goddess knew what she was doing when she tied our souls together. And if I'm too broken, then we'll help you heal for as long as it takes, with no expectations beyond that. His smile was gentle. We're not going anywhere, Lyra. Bond or no bond, you're a pack now. You're home. The word home hit her like a physical thing. When was the last time anywhere had felt like home? Not Silver Creek, where she'd always been different, defective, unwanted. Not even her mother's cabin, warm as it was with love, because they'd both known they were hiding temporary, waiting for the moment when the past caught up with them. But here in this place, with these wolves who saw value in her differences, who celebrated her gifts instead of condemning them, maybe here could be home. Kale seemed to sense the shift in her emotions because his smile widened. Come on, he said, standing and offering his hand. I have something else to show you. He led her to a different trail, this one descending into a hidden valley that she hadn't known existed. At its heart was a hot spring, steam rising from water that was crystal clear and inviting. Private, Kale said. The alphas use it sometimes, but it's not widely known. I thought you might appreciate a place to relax without the pack watching. Lyra looked at the water, then at Kale's sudden realization hitting. You're not suggesting... I'm not suggesting anything. Kale raised his hands in mock surrender. I'm telling you, this place exists and that you're welcome to use it whenever you want. Alone or with company, your choice entirely. He started to turn away, then paused. For what it's worth, Lyra, I would very much like to kiss you, but only if and when you're ready. The bond makes me want to claim you in every way possible, but my honor requires your consent. So whenever you decide you want that, you let me know. Then he was gone, disappearing back up the trail and leaving Lyra alone with a hot spring, a racing heart, and the knowledge that she wanted exactly what he'd just offered. She wanted to be kissed. She wanted to be claimed. She wanted to stop being afraid and start being brave. That evening, all 6 alphas appeared at her cabin for dinner, as had become their custom. But this time when Kale met her eyes across the table, something passed between them. A recognition, an understanding. A promise. After the others left, Kale lingered at the door. The offer stands, he said quietly, whenever you're ready. Stay, Lyra heard herself say. Just for a few minutes, I want to try something. Kale's expression shifted to something warm and patient. He closed the door and moved to the chair across from her, sitting down and folding his hands in his lap like he had all the time in the world. What do you want to try? Lyra stood on trembling legs and crossed the small space between them. Before she could lose her courage, before doubt could overwhelm bravery, she leaned down and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was chaste, barely more than a brush of mouths, but the connection exploded between them like summer lightning. Lyra felt Kale's sharp intake of breath, felt his hands come up to rest gently on her hips, felt the rightness of it down to her bones. When she pulled back, those eyes were molten. May I kiss you properly? He asked, his voice rough. Yes. Kale stood in one fluid motion, his hands sliding from her hips to frame her face with infinite gentleness. Then he kissed her the way she'd secretly wanted to be kissed for weeks, thoroughly, deeply, with a patience that spoke of leashed desire and iron control. The world narrowed to just this, his mouth on hers, his hands cradling her face like she was precious, the pulse singing between them in perfect harmony. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale rested his forehead against hers again. That, he said, was worth waiting for. Lyra laughed, the sound surprising her. Just one kiss, and I'm already overwhelmed. How am I supposed to handle 5 more? One day at a time. Kale pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. One choice at a time. No pressure, no expectations. Just whatever feels right to you. He left soon after, and Lyra sat in her cabin, feeling the ghost of his kiss on her lips and the warmth of the bond in her chest. She pulled out Ash's journal and wrote, Day 21. I kissed Kale. He kissed me back. It felt like coming home. 9 days left in my trial period, and I think I already know what my answer will be. I'm just not sure I'm ready to say it out loud yet. But in her heart, in the place where the 6 bonds lived and grew stronger every day, she knew the truth. She was falling in love with all of them. And for the first time since Thorne's rejection, that didn't terrify her. It felt like destiny. Days 22 through 29 passed in a blur of training laughter and slowly deepening connections. On day 23, Finn took her to a neighboring Pax territory for a diplomatic summit. Lyra watched him negotiate a trade agreement with such skill that the other Alpha asked if she'd be willing to mediate future disputes. See, Finn said on the way home, his amber eyes warm. Status is performance. You just convinced Alpha Harrison that you're someone worth listening to. On day 25, Storm taught her chess strategy while rain drummed against the cabin windows. When she finally won a game, her first victory, he kissed her. Slowly, thoroughly, with the kind of controlled intensity that made her knees weak. I've been wanting to do that for weeks, he murmured against her lips. On day 27, Rowan took her on a security patrol. When rogues attacked, Lyra fought beside him, her selective shifting allowing her to wield a blade while using her claws. Together, they drove off 5 attackers. You're packed now, Rowan said afterward, his respect clear. Not just because of the bonds, because you've earned it. Each day brought her closer to all 6 of them. Each night she wrote in Ash's journal, tracking the slow transformation from scared refugee to valued pack member. But day 30 arrived with unexpected news. Lyra was helping Ash in the healing house when Rowan burst through the door, his expression grim. We have visitors, he said, from Silver Creek Pack. They're requesting a formal audience with the council. The blood drained from Lyra's face. Thorne, him. And that councilman who pushed for your exile, Edgar Whitlock. Rowan's jaw was tight. They're claiming you were promised to Thorne before the rejection, and that Nightfang violated territorial agreements by harboring you. Ash's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Lyra, you don't have to see them. We can send them away. No, Lyra's voice was steadier than she felt. I need to face them. Because running would mean Thorn still had power over her. And she'd come too far to let him take that away. The pack's council chamber was packed. Every available seat was filled, and wolves lined the walls, all there to witness this confrontation. Word had spread quickly. The Omega who'd killed a rogue, saved Marcus's life, and trained with a head warrior, was about to face her former alpha. Lyra entered, flanked by all 6 of her alphas. Kale walked on her right, his presence solid and reassuring. The others formed a protective semicircle around her, a clear message she was theirs, and they would defend her. Thorn stood at the center of the chamber with Edgar beside him. He looked exactly as she remembered, tall, powerful amber eyes cold with calculation. But now she could see what she'd missed before. The weakness hidden beneath the dominance. The cowardice masquerading as strength. He wasn't the man she'd thought he was. He never had been. Lyra Sylvain, Edgar began, his voice dripping with false authority. You were exiled from Silver Creek Pack for being defective and unworthy of bearing an alpha's heirs. Yet here you stand, having somehow convinced Nightfang to harbor a known defect. Careful, Whitlock. Kale's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. You're in my territory now, and in Nightfang we don't tolerate wolves who insult our pack members. Edgar paled slightly but pressed on. The point remains. Alpha Thorn had a connection to this Omega before she was exiled. According to Pack Law Article 47, a rejected bond can be reinstated within 90 days if the Alpha provides new evidence of the Omega's value. I see. Storm's voice was cold analytical. And what evidence does Alpha Thorn provide? Thorn stepped forward, and for the first time his eyes met Lyra's. She saw calculation there, ambition, but no love. Never love. I've reconsidered my rejection, he said smoothly. Lyra Sylvain has proven herself more valuable than I initially assessed. Her healing abilities and unique shifting capabilities could benefit Silver Creek Pack. I'm prepared to revoke my rejection and claim her as my mate. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Lyra felt her hands shake, but she forced herself to remain still. To breathe. To remember who she'd become in these past 30 days. Lyra, Kale said quietly for her ears only. You don't have to respond. I can have them removed right now. No, Lyra stepped forward away from the protective circle of her alphas and faced Thorn directly. I have something to say. The room fell silent. You rejected me, Lyra said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber. You called me defective, weak, unworthy of bearing an alpha's heirs. You allowed your council to exile me to what you knew would be my death. You stood by while Edgar sentenced me to die alone in the wilderness. She took another step closer, and Thorn actually retreated slightly. But I didn't die. I survived. I fought rogues and won. I found a pack that values strength in all its forms, not just the narrow definition Silver Creek clings to. I've trained with warriors, saved lives with my healing gift, and proven that what you called a defect is actually power you were too ignorant to recognize. Lyra let her right hand shift, black claws extending. The crowd gasped. This isn't weakness. It's control. It's tactical flexibility. It's a gift from the Selene bloodline that your pack helped destroy because you feared what you couldn't understand. She shifted her hand back to human form and met Thorn's eyes squarely. You don't want me because you recognize my value. You want me because letting me go makes you look weak. Because the Omega you rejected became someone powerful, and that threatens your authority. Lyra's voice hardened. Well, here's my response to your request. I reject you, Thorn Blackwell. I reject your pack, your politics, and your pathetic attempt to reclaim something you threw away like garbage. The chamber erupted again, but Lyra wasn't finished. Furthermore, I accept my place in Nightfang Pack, not as a refugee, but as a full member, as mate to 6 alphas who saw my worth when you were blind to it. She turned to Kale, Storm, Darius, Finn, Rowan, and Ash. 6 pairs of eyes watched her with love, pride, and fierce protectiveness. I choose them. I choose this pack. I choose the life I've built here over the prison you wanted me to return to. Kale's smile could have lit the entire chamber. And we choose you. Lyra Sylvain of the Selene bloodline, we accept you as our mate, our equal, our partner in all things. This is irregular, Edgar sputtered. Pack law clearly states. Pack law also states, Storm interrupted, pulling a leather-bound tome from beneath the council table, that an Omega who has been formally exiled from one pack and accepted into another has no legal obligation to her former pack. Article 52, Section 3, Lyra Sylvain was exiled by Silver Creek's own vote. That exile severed all legal ties. He flipped through pages with practiced ease. Furthermore, Article 47, which you're attempting to invoke, requires that the Alpha provide new evidence of value. But Silver Creek declared Lyra valueless when they exiled her. You can't simultaneously claim she has no value and that you've discovered new value. The legal logic is contradictory. Edgar's face turned purple. This is sophistry, the spirit of the law. The spirit of the law protects Omegas from being treated as property, Finn interjected smoothly, which is exactly what you're attempting to do. Lyra is a person with agency, not a resource to be reclaimed when convenient. Thorne's expression darkened. Nightfang is making a grave mistake. Silver Creek has Alliance's resources influence. You're risking pack relations over one Omega. That Omega, Darius said quietly, dangerously, saved the life of one of our pack members when even our head healer couldn't find the injury fast enough. She's proven her worth a dozen times over. And if you think we'll trade her safety for your political convenience, you don't know Nightfang at all. This isn't over, Edgar threatened. We'll take this to the Regional Pack Council. We'll file formal complaints. You'll leave. Kale's voice carried absolute alpha authority. Now, before I decide that your presence in my territory constitutes a threat to one of my pack members and respond accordingly. The threat was clear. Thorne and Edgar could leave peacefully, or they could be removed by force. Thorne's jaw clenched, but he was smart enough to recognize when he'd lost. This isn't finished, Lyra. You'll regret. The only thing I regret, Lyra said calmly, is wasting 3 months believing you were someone worth loving. But I've learned from that mistake. I know what real alphas look like now, and you don't measure up. The dismissal was complete devastating. Thorne's face flushed with rage and humiliation, but there was nothing he could do. Not here, not in Nightfang territory, not with 6 alphas and an entire pack watching. We're leaving, he finally ground out, but Silver Creek will remember this insult. And Nightfang will remember you tried to reclaim an Omega you sentenced to death, Kale replied. Choose your next moves carefully, Blackwell, because if you threaten her again, there won't be diplomacy. There will be war. Rowan and several warriors escorted Thorne and Edgar from the chamber. The moment they were gone, the assembled pack erupted in howls of approval. Lyra stood in the center of it all, shaking but triumphant. She'd faced her greatest fear and won. She'd stood up to the Alpha who'd broken her and come out stronger. And then 6 pairs of arms were around her, 6 Alphas holding her close, their bonds blazing with love and pride and fierce joy. You were magnificent, Kale murmured against her hair. Absolutely devastating, Storm agreed. I've never been more proud of anyone, Ash said. Lyra laughed, the sound breaking on a sob. I was terrified. You were brave, Finn corrected. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's acting despite it. And you just told your abuser to fuck off in front of 2 packs worth of witnesses, Rowan added with a grin. That's the most badass thing I've seen in years. Language, Darius chided, but he was smiling too. When they finally pulled apart, Lyra looked at each of them in turn. These 6 alphas who'd given her space to heal, time to trust choice in everything. Who'd seen her as a person first and Omega second, and a mate only when she was ready. I have something to say, she announced. The chamber quieted again, everyone watching. My 30-day trial period is officially over as of tomorrow, but I don't need tomorrow to make my decision. Lyra took a deep breath. I choose to stay. Not as a refugee, not on trial, but as your mate. All 6 of you, if you'll have me. If we'll have you, Kale laughed, the sound full of joy. Lyra, we've been yours since the moment we met you. We were just waiting for you to choose us back. Then I choose you. Lyra smiled, feeling tears stream down her face. I choose all of you. I choose this pack. I choose home. The chamber erupted again, but this time Lyra barely heard it. Because Kale was kissing her, and then Storm and Finn, and all 6 of them were surrounding her with love and warmth and the absolute certainty of belonging. Tonight, Kale said when they finally came up for air, if you're ready, we'd like to complete the bond properly. All 6 of us. Make it permanent and unbreakable. Lyra knew what he was asking. The claiming marks the physical completion of what had been building for 30 days. The final step that would tie them together forever. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'm ready. Are you sure? Ash asked gently. There's no rush. We can wait. I'm sure. Lyra looked at each of them, these 6 alphas who'd become her world. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. That night, in a private room prepared with soft furs and candles that cast dancing shadows, 6 alphas claimed their mate. They were gentle, patient, reverent. Each touch was a question, each kiss a promise. They took turns showing her pleasure. She'd never imagined teaching her body to respond to theirs, weaving the bonds tighter with every shared breath. When Kale finally bit down on her neck, marking her with the first claiming mark, Lyra gasped at the intensity of it. The bond between them blazed into full existence, and she could feel everything he felt. Love, pride, possessiveness tempered with respect, desire mixed with tenderness. Then he stormed his mark on the other side of her neck, his emotions flowing through intellectual fascination, mixed with deep affection, strategic planning for their future, protective instinct, so fierce it made her breath catch. Darius marked her shoulder, and she felt his warrior's heart, respect for her, strength, determination to train her until she was unstoppable, pride in her courage. Finn's mark was gentle on her collarbone, his diplomat's soul showing through admiration for her growth plans, for how she'd shine in pack politics, joy in her quick wit. Rowan's mark was fierce on her other shoulder, approval of her fighting spirit, commitment to her safety, satisfaction in her fire. Ash's mark was the last, placed carefully over her heart, healer's compassion, counselor's understanding, deep wells of love that would help her heal from everything she'd endured. When it was done, when all 6 marks decorated her skin like a constellation, Lyra felt complete in a way she'd never experienced. 6 bonds, 6 hearts, 6 souls tied to hers in permanent, unbreakable connection. "I love you," she whispered to all of them. "All of you." "We love you too," they answered in unison. "Forever." Lyra stood on the stone balcony of Nayat Fang's fortress, her hand resting on her belly, where twin heartbeats fluttered. 90 days had passed since the claiming, and the moon goddess had blessed their bond immediately. Twins, one with Kale's silver eyes, one with Storm's ice blue, according to Ash's ultrasound. Both healthy, both strong, both destined to carry on the Selene bloodline. "There you are." Kale appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. The other 5 followed, forming their customary protective circle. "Just thinking," Lyra said, leaning back against Kale's chest, "about how much has changed." Below in the courtyard, warriors trained. Marcus Ironfoot, fully recovered thanks to Lyra's healing, sparred with younger pack members, teaching them the moves she'd shown him. Dorothy Hartwell walked past with a group of apprentice healers, all of them learning the diagnostic techniques Lyra had developed. The Pack Council met in the Great Hall, several members carrying documents Lyra had helped draft regarding Omega rights and selective shifting recognition. "You've transformed this pack," Storm observed. "Laws changed attitudes, shifted, new alliances formed, all because you had the courage to demand respect." "We transformed it together," Lyra corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." "That's the point of having 6 mates," Finn said with a grin. "Distribute the work, multiply the success." "And the love," Ash added softly. "And the protection." Darius set his hand resting possessively on her shoulder near his mark. "And the future," Rowan finished, nodding toward her belly. Movement at the territory border caught Lyra's attention. A messenger was arriving, purple flags indicating diplomatic business. "News from the Regional Pack Council." Storm said, his intelligence network as efficient as ever. "Their ruling on Silver Creek's complaint should be ready." It had taken 3 months, but the Regional Council had finally heard the case. Thorn had argued that Nightfang violated pack protocol. Nightfang had countered with evidence of Silver Creek's abuse and Lyra's legal right to choose her own pack. The messenger approached Kale directly, handing over a sealed scroll. All 6 alphas and Lyra gathered close as Kale broke the seal and read. His smile was slow and satisfied. "The Regional Council rules in favor of Nightfang on all counts. Silver Creek's complaint is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, they're implementing new protections for XL Omegas across all packs, citing Lyra's case as precedent." Lyra's knees went weak with relief. It was over. Truly over. "There's more," Kelly continued. "They're formally recognizing selective shifting as a legitimate manifestation of the Selene bloodline gifts, not a defect. All packs are required to update their documentation accordingly." "But you just changed policy for every pack in the region," Storm said, pride clear in his voice. "Omegas with selective shifting will no longer be automatically labeled defective." Lyra thought about all the young wolves like her growing up believing they were broken, who might now see their gifts as strengths instead of weaknesses. "Thank the moon goddess," she whispered. "Thank yourself," Ash corrected. "You fought for this. You stood up and demanded change." That evening, the pack gathered for a celebration. The Great Hall was filled with wolves who'd come to honor their Luna, The first six-way made it Omega in 3 centuries, the healer who'd saved lives, the warrior who'd defended their borders, the diplomat who'd changed pack law. As Lyra moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and well wishes, she felt the 6 bonds humming with contentment. 6 different types of love, 6 different strengths, all flowing through her. She caught sight of Dorothy Hartwell across the room. The elder healer raised her glass in a private toast, her eyes saying what words couldn't. You did it. You survived, and you thrived. Lyra raised her own glass in return. Then she felt it a flutter in her belly, distinct and strong. The twins moving for the first time. Kale, she whispered, grabbing his hand and placing it on her stomach. They're moving. Within seconds, all 6 alphas had their hands on her belly, feeling the small movements of their children. The bonds blazed with shared joy so intense, it brought tears to all their eyes. Our heirs, Kale murmured. Our legacy, Storm added. Our future, said the others. Lyra looked around the great hall at the pack that had become her family, the alphas, who'd become her world, the life she'd built from the ashes of rejection. She thought about the girl who'd knelt in Silver Creek's hall 90 days ago, believing she was broken and worthless. That girl was gone. In her place stood Luna Lyra Sylvain of Nayat Fang Pack, mate to 6 alphas, healer, warrior, diplomat, mother of the next generation of Selene wolves who would grow up knowing their selective shifting was a gift, not a curse. What are you thinking? Ash asked softly, always attuned to her emotions. Lyra smiled, her hand covering the 6 hands resting on her belly. I'm thinking, she said, that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the greatest triumphs. I was rejected, exiled, left to die. And now I'm standing here surrounded by more love than I ever imagined possible, carrying the future of an ancient bloodline, having changed laws that will protect Omegas for generations. She looked at each of her mates in turn. I'm thinking that the moon goddess knew exactly what she was doing when she gave me 6 alphas instead of 1, because loving you, all of you, has made me stronger than I ever could have been alone. And loving you has made us better than we ever were apart, Kale replied, speaking for all 6. As the celebration continued around them, as pack members danced and sang and howled their joy to the moon, Lyra closed her eyes and sent a silent prayer to the moon goddess. Thank you for breaking me. Thank you for the wilderness that forged me. Thank you for 6 alphas who saw me when I was invisible, valued me when I was worthless, loved me when I was unlovable. Thank you for turning my greatest defeat into my greatest victory. Thank you for bringing me home. The bonds pulsed with answering warmth, 6 hearts beating in perfect synchronization with hers, and Lyra knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The collar had fallen away. She was free. She was home. She was loved. And that was worth every moment of suffering it had taken to get here.